I know most of you know who I am. For those of you who don't, I'm the Active and Safe Routes to School Program Coordinator here in Ottawa for Green Communities Canada. So we're the folks engaging with some of the schools around the city to try and make it safer and more convenient for more families to walk and wheel to school. Enough said about that. I first met Kim actually 3.5 years ago, roughly, June of 2010 at an active transportation conference in Montreal. And at that time, she was running a program called Streets Education out of New York, and I was just so blown away by the incredibly innovative work that they were doing, directly engaging with elementary school students in New York City, getting them out into the street, looking at traffic issues and capturing speed and writing to their city councilors to request changes. That I made a decision in there, if I ever found the resources to bring her to Ottawa and help us with some of our engagement with teachers in the schools we're working with, I would do so. Long story short, that moment finally happened yesterday. We had a very successful workshop with about 35 teachers from the Ottawa Carleton District and Ottawa Catholic School Boards. We had some Ottawa Public Health staff, as well as staff from the Ottawa Student Transportation Authority. Yes, the school bus people in the room, and we had a really fantastic morning, both with Kim and a number of other local program delivery organizations, everyone from the Salamander Theatre for Young audiences to Premier Champions, to really get some of those teachers fired up about how they can engage their students in the classroom and outside of the classroom, and at reimagining their streets and their neighborhoods. So it was a great start. I'm very pleased to introduce Kim to you. She is now the Assistant Commissioner for Education and Outreach at the New York City Department of Transportation. Kim has been working to make underserved communities better and safer in New York City for nearly 25 years. Originally a musical theater performer, and I think that will come out, she began her teaching career bringing richer arts education to New York City public schools through organizations such as the Metropolitan Opera, the 92nd Street Y, and the acclaimed Tada Youth Theater. After a hiatus living in Jakarta, Indonesia, she began working with after-school programs specializing in middle school programming and teacher development. After a 4-year-old boy was killed by an SUV a block away from her home, she began taking what she knew about arts and education and brought it directly to street safety. She created Streets Education for the advocacy website Streets Blog, where she developed unique programming matching safety education with child-led advocacy. In her current position as the Assistant Commissioner for Education and Outreach at the New York City Department of Transportation, she oversees a team of 30 people working with 500 schools, senior centers, and community organizations each year to help make streets safer than they have been in over a century. She has been thrilled to be part of the Department of Transportation these past 3 years under the fearless leadership of Janet Sadiq Khan, their commissioner. Kim is a graduate of Hampshire College, lives in Brooklyn with her 2 children and husband Andy Wiley-Schwartz, who's also an Assistant Commissioner for Public Spaces at the Department of Transportation. Lately, you can find her hopping on a city bike, their version of Dixie bike, to get around town whenever possible. I give you Kim Wiley-Schwartz.
Thank you. Hi, well, a big thank you. I know it's not easy to take this kind of time out of your workday. I'm very familiar with the freneticism that goes on when you have to serve the people of a city in your capacities. So it's very important to remember I'm not a traffic engineer. I'm a lay person whose job it is to explain the ideas and the concepts that we're developing to the general public and work with the general public around these issues so that they can have the safety that they need. So as we get into this, I'm going to show you some things. I asked my traffic engineers to prepare some slides here so that for those of you who speak traffic engineer, the slides will be in that language. And I will also try to work through these things. So I know we don't have a lot of time, but I also have a few other things. If you'd like to do questions and answers, I have some other photographs and things like that hidden on my thumbnail drive should we get into it. So I began here with Mayor Michael Bloomberg because really he's been the driving force behind all of this. 6 years ago he developed the Plan YC, which was a mandate to all of his officers and all of his agencies to say that we had to have a greener city by 2030. And so that was our mandate, and we've worked under that ever since, and it has allowed us to do many wonderfully active things, because really this is what New York is, right? Everybody thinks of these crazy cabs driving recklessly, which they still do. But really this is New York, right? Those pedestrians are just taking their lives into their own hand. Those young people somehow trying to get across the street. That's the New York that we inherited. Or the New York of the 50s. Here you'll see Times Square, giving tons of space to traffic and very little to pedestrians, when you can see the outbalance in the modes. Or how it was 6 years ago when Jeanette Zadokhan took over. Again, you can see, where are all of those people supposed to go, right? We've got room for some vehicles, but people are spilling onto the roadways, and it is a dangerous situation. So we had some strategic goals that came out of Plan YC. Our first and foremost is to cut traffic fatalities and injuries whenever and wherever possible. And we would like to cut them in half by 2030. Now, in 2007, our fatality number was 274 out of 8 million people. So that would be a statistical, you know, it wouldn't even count if you were a statistician. But for us, 274, it's 274 too many. And of course our injuries, and that's what we don't really talk about, are off the charts. And those are wartime injuries. People have horrible brain injuries, traumatic brain injury, loss of limb, loss of functionality. Those are the things that we're really trying to change on our streets. We also wanted to create a program, oh thank you, that treats the streets as our public space as, to kind of reimagine that all of our streets are public space that we share, and they should be treated thusly. And that's been a real tenet of our work. Double bicycle commuting by 2012, and also to implement a rapid bus system. We do not have BRT. We call it select bus service, and we simply give priority lanes and off-board fare collection. And so that's been, but that was a really new idea. So I'm going to go through a few things that I think will be particularly interesting to you. What we learned is we had to do these things quickly, and we had to do these things out of materials that we could control, so that we could make sure that we were driving fatalities and injuries down as quickly as possible. So, you know, in New York, I don't know how it goes for you, but we get an idea, we design, we're going to do curb extensions, bulb outs, whatever, we call them neck downs. That you do, but those are capital redesign. We have to go to the Department of Construction, Design and Construction, DDC, and then that goes through a capital redesign, and then 10 years later, we'll get the neck down that we wanted. I live in downtown Brooklyn. There was a downtown Brooklyn traffic calming project. We now have seen it. It was developed in 2001. Okay, so we just realized that we had to work faster than that. So what could we do? Well, we have a sidewalk crew. And our sidewalk crew puts in curbs, fixes sidewalks, and puts in tree pits, knows how to do all of those things. And we have our paint crew. So we think, what can we do with our paint crew and our sidewalk crew that will make lasting changes now? So here's Casino Boulevard. It's a very well-known area. Lots of seniors, very busy. And as you can see, this crossing, it's hard to tell now, but it's what was one of our high crash areas with the left-hand turns that were happening and everything. So we just simply send our sidewalk crew there, and they put in a median. There was enough room for a median, and they develop it. They put in a tree pit, which now actually has a tree in it, and they organize the traffic. And then in our shop, we do these bollards. They're just a very simple bollard, and that's really because cars really, they really need to be reminded not to go onto the curb. So, so needless to say, by now there's a lot of yellow marks from cabs. No, it's actually, we don't have yellow cabs in that area. But, so I'm going to just bring you through a bunch of these slides just so that you can see what I'm talking about. So here, this is in our Safe Routes to School catchment area. We have a strange arrangement where cars are going both directions, but there's no crosswalk, and as you can see, there's a mother with her child here. So stay focused. The building in the background will let you know for sure that this is the same spot. So what we did was we just simply reorganized it. ban the left-hand turn, put in a do not enter, change the traffic pattern, which we can easily do with signage, and then put in a ADA compliant median here that has space for planting. Again, that's just our sidewalk crew. Here's Adam Clayton Powell, and I'm going to do a case study for you later. We can get into that. It was our most dangerous corridor, even more than Queens Boulevard, which you may know about. It's referred to as the Boulevard of Death. But Queens Boulevard we've actually organized and made a lot better, but Adam Clayton Powell was still suffering. So here we are at a famous 125th Street, right next to the Apollo Theater, and Adam Clayton Powell. And here what we are going to do is ban the left-hand turn and reorganize the traffic. And for those of you with a keen eye, you can also see the bicyclists going the wrong direction in the left-hand turn lane. So clever. So here we are. So again, just banning the turn, reclaiming the space, making an organized crossing, banning all of the left-hand turns so that people will have to make their turns outside, and the famous Sam Schwartz anti-gridlock markings in the middle of the intersection. Here, this is one of my favorite ones. This is in the Bronx. Again, just a monumentally long crossing where by simply reorganizing it and putting a median in, we gain a huge amount of safety. This is in northern Manhattan, where we reorganized and changed the bike lane. So let's see that again. So you can see that it was a two-way street, which wasn't working, with a class 2 bike lane, which wasn't really protecting anybody. So we reorganized it, pulled everything out, and changed the flow of traffic to make sure that everyone was enjoying themselves. And as you can see, what we get out of that is, as a result, is sort of a plaza. Here in our park, always problematic, right, mid-block crossings, people following these things but without any organized traffic. So here we are, we again just simply put in a small median, giving clues to the drivers that people will be crossing. Oh, I don't know why this is jumping. It's on its own time. This is my favorite spot. Hopefully it won't change too quickly. This is on the way to the Queensboro Bridge. On the Queens side, it's a really, really difficult place to organize, and children are all over the place. They go through this intersection to get to 3 different schools. So just with mostly paint and taking that one median that was where the service road is for that apartment house, it's reorganized. Now again, it's just paint, but it really has made a huge difference. And if you look carefully, you can see a gigantic fleet of crossing guards waiting for the children in the morning. Here they are. That's how many we need to get the kids across. Now it's always a dangerous job to be a crossing guard in New York City, but particularly dangerous in this case. And so they're there, they're waiting to do their job. But again, a reorganization that helps motorists understand what's expected of them. And here's our most famous redesign, this is Times Square. I'm sure you've heard about this. We closed Broadway to traffic, kept traffic open on 7th Avenue. And by reorganizing it and reallocating the space for people, the 350,000 people a day that visit Times Square now have a place to be. So, and that's not a rendering, that's an actual picture. So, you know, by closing it, now the way we did that was we literally closed it in the middle of the night on Memorial Day, which is like your Victoria Day, right? That first day that people go off for a 3-day weekend to kick off the summer. And so on Monday, Sunday night, we put out construction barrels and literally just threw a bunch of deck chairs that we found because our chairs were late in coming. And sent some of our volunteers from the DOT off at Long Broadway to tell cab drivers that they were going to need to make left or right turns before they hit 47th Street, where they were no longer able to travel. And this is now in Capitol redesign. We've ripped up the street. We never have had a chance to rip up the street in so long that we are removing all the trolley tracks for the first time, and also Con Edison, you know, our electric, our gas. These things have literally not been able to reorganize themselves underneath Times Square. So we're taking the time to do that, and it should be open by, who knows, it's DTC. But hopefully we'll see that in the near future. It's important to say that when we did that, we have a 63% reduction in in injuries to pedestrians and a 45% reduction to injuries to motorists. So that's sort of what we're starting to do now, is we put these things in as proof of concept. We take a lot of statistics. We're looking constantly at injury rates, fatality rates, and collecting the data so that we can make sure that these things that we do in paint are good ideas, first of all. But then secondly, once we're sure of these things, it's very, very hard then to take them back. You kind of can't say, oh, well, we don't want Times Square anymore, and then you have to also say, then we want 63% increase in pedestrian injury. So that's kind of nobody wants to say that. Now, in the case of Times Square, it's been hugely helpful. There's been a huge increase for the, I guess the rents have gone up, the retail has gone up, the air quality has changed. There's been a lot of benefits to Times Square that we've recorded very diligently to really make sure that it was the right decision. So I want to talk to you guys about Clayton Powell Boulevard. In the last 6 years before we began our work in Clayton Powell, we had 12 people killed between 153rd and 116th Streets. It's in central Harlem, and it's a two-way arterial that leads to the Bronx, and particularly to Yankee Stadium. Did I say Yankees? Here, across the border. It was a fact. So that people, are on their, Yankee fans are on their way to the stadium. I know you understand what I'm trying to say. So I wanted to take a look at this with you and talk to you about how we reorganized this and redesigned it quickly. So here, just to show you the injuries along the corridor, many of the crashes here we're showing you are motor vehicle occupants. And I think a lot of what happens is when you go into a community to try to change these things, they're not actually the people in the motor vehicles, but they're always worried about the people in the motor vehicles. Will they be able to drive fast enough? Will they be able to park? So we really like to try to concentrate on this and let people know just that we need to reorganize things for motorists, not just pedestrians. And in this particular case, and I'm just showing you the lower part, we had 3 pedestrian fatalities as we were working on the project. So as we became involved, and then more north, we had 2 more. So in the time that we started presenting these ideas to the community board, who are the people who sign off on this, we had 3 people killed as we could come back and forth. So the existing conditions, you can see this, people turning left in both directions, just ridiculous left-hand turns. The conditions also led to, because there were 3 lanes, they were completely disorganized. So no left turning lane, which means there were a lot of back pressure on the left-hand turn, and a double parking phenomenon. But this is where the most important Baptist churches are in our community, and people will drive, if you were a baby and you went to this church, now you're a grandmother, you come into the same church, and you drive from wherever you live now. So the double parking is just really intense. There are difficult crossings, so you can see this person has gotten stuck. That's actually a median there. She's not in, but there's nothing there. It's like there's a tiny little slip of a median. So we have lots of people stuck. And so what we said to them is, why don't we just paint some pedestrian islands, put in some left-hand turns, and make a wider parking lane. Let's do that. Let's reorganize the street so that there's actually only 2 lanes of moving traffic. We'll organize a left-hand turn lane every other block, and we'll give you a bigger parking lane, so a 13-foot parking lane, in fact, so that you can get away with double parking on Sundays, even though it's illegal in the city of New York. So just to show you, again, this is for the traffic engineers in here. So that's the idea, is we had 3 moving lanes and a parking lane. And so we proposed to go down to 2 moving lanes with an organized turn lane in the middle, reclaiming the space on every other side, so depending on who was getting the turn, and making that use of that into a pedestrian island. And then widening the parking lane to 13 with a large solid stripe, which therefore can sort of also serve as a potential bike lane, kind of. So here again is the existing with a bird's eye view, and here is the proposed organization. So these are renderings that I have. I couldn't find the actuals in the deck when I was looking. So this would be the idea, right? So reclaiming the space, and this is basically what it looks like. Reclaiming the space in the median for pedestrians, reorganizing it, and doing it all in paint. And we also use this treatment. It's an epoxy gravel. So we take an epoxy, we have a gravel that we make out of sand and reclaimed toilets and porcelain, which we then grind up and make into this treatment. And so it's very tactile. For those walking, it's non-slippery at all. And it's also, people really understand it. We often have to mark these at first when we put them in with flexible delineators so that cars and pedestrians really understand how the space is organized. So again, another view of what that looks like. And another view, there's the flexible delineators. So we'll often put them in, ugly though they are, to really establish things while drivers and pedestrians get used to the environment. Now here's a case study I'm really the most proud of. This is 4th Avenue in Brooklyn. It is it runs about 100 blocks from north to south in Brooklyn. And it's the way to many of our large roads, especially the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. So if the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway gets backed up, everyone ditches off and they go on to 3rd and 4th Avenues. However, along 4th Avenue corridor from 15th Street to 65th Street, we have a huge concentration of people. There are 12 schools right on 4th Avenue that the kids have to cross to get to. And there are 2 senior centers, and the senior centers are on either side of the street. And we've had actually 2 senior fatalities there with people trying to navigate between their 2 centers. And then 2 very important community centers that are really the rock of the community. Everyone goes there, Center for Family Life and the Uprose Community Center for Environmental Justice, and they're amazing places. So people all are living and working. This is our largest walk-to-work community in New York City. People live and work and walk there to the docks. So this was really a huge problem, and the community said, no way are you going to make anything different on 4th Avenue. We'll have so much traffic, it'll be choked, and it's not worth it to us. We're not even gonna have this conversation with you. However, because of all of the situations there, our high fatality and injury numbers, we had to prioritize this. We can't keep having the numbers come from the same places all of the time, every year, right? We have to go to the places we know have the highest fatalities and injuries and fix the problem, so we can move to the next place where we can fix the problem, so we can move to the next place. So we decided that what we would do is take our 10 highest high crash corridors, string together the corridor, and figure out how to solve the problem. Well, for me, my job is to go into schools and work with people. So my staff immediately started going to the schools, teaching traffic safety, how to ride in cars, on bicycles, and be safe pedestrians, but also taking the kids out and taking a look at their situation, talking to their parents, and working with principals. The crash details were very high. I don't know how much of this you can see, but just pedestrians crossing against the signal because if they could find an opportunity to try to run for their lives, basically they were. Motor crashes, a lot of rear end crashes. Again, organizing the left-hand turns, a lot of what we call back pressure. There's speeding at night, it's a parking lot during the day, all of these same problems that really made this a big deal. So this is the safety concerns, these long pedestrian crossings, many vulnerable pedestrians. We just had to change it. And just for those of you who care about these things, here are your traffic volumes. So as you can see, we got high traffic volumes, especially at peak hours. So here was the idea. You take 3 lanes that weren't really working very well, and you reorganize them into two, and paint a buffer in the middle to reclaim space for pedestrians. Make your wide parking lane, again, so that when people do double park, which they're not allowed to do, there's a little bit of room for them. Much less accepted or appropriate here. That was just something for Sundays on Clayton Powell. But most importantly, to organize the traffic so that the kids crossing the street could get there safely, and if they had to wait in the middle, they could. So here's a before and after shot of what we did. So we reorganized the traffic to 2 lanes. You can see that hefty parking lane, and we painted the median in the middle. Again, it is jumping. So here's another idea. So using that gravel treatment at the ends to create a larger median for pedestrians to wait, and to create the inside with paint and paint only. This way, we just put in another leg of this, and it went in a day and a half. And again, reorganizing the turn lane. And in this case, in order to get this work really done, we had to ban a number of left-hand turns. I'll take your questions just 1 sec. So again, I just want you to see what it looks like as we reorganize the street. And here's an actual, and there's another actual. So we ban that left-hand turn because there's not enough room for the pedestrians. And you can see we have these old existing metal curbs that we're working around. That, my friends, is an 18-inch median that pedestrian is waiting in up there. Do you see that? I don't know how to do that in meters, but you understand what I mean. It's not big enough for any pedestrian to wait. You can see the pedestrian waiting up at the top, and now we've made more room. What's your question?
Just asking if there was any consideration of creating bicycle lanes as you...
Yes. So 4th Avenue is a really difficult place to put in a bicycle lane. We have bike lanes on 5th Avenue, which are very well used. And 3rd Avenue would be impossible. It's our industrial truck route, and it's underneath the elevated highway. So it's just the particulate matter that we couldn't put it there. So the idea here, this is like one of my bicycle group's tricks, is you can see that solid line is a place to tuck in as a cyclist. You have to, of course, you don't have the 3 feet that you need from the doors of the parked cars, but you can kind of split the difference there. So because bicyclists are using 4th Avenue anyway, it's just meant to give them a small place to tuck in. But unfortunately, going from 3 to 2 was such a revolutionary idea to make room for bikes. What we really would have had to do was, instead of painting the median in the middle, we would have had to make those bike lanes. And I don't think that New Yorkers are quite ready to share, pedestrians are quite ready to share with bicyclists like that when they have that little space. We have plenty of other places where we put the bicyclists on the inside, but then the whole thing has been more like a pedestrian refuge, and the pedestrians can tuck in. But I look forward to the day when we could go from 3 to a 1 with separated bike lane conversion. This was wildly successful. The community voted heavily in favor of it, from 15th Street to 65th Street. I saw these people I had been working with for a number of years change right in front of my eyes as they considered as they weighed their decision making, and as they decided to prioritize pedestrians and the safety of children in their neighborhoods. It was really an amazing experience, but I think in part because kids were coming to the meetings and they were able to say, we stood out with a speed detector, and we see that people are going 20 miles an hour over the speed limit, and that's unacceptable in our neighborhood. And if we were to get hit by a car, we're much more likely to be killed, right? And there's a middle school there, and the principal has the kids, they roll out of school to the Burger King across, and I said, we didn't have a Safe Routes to Burger King program yet, but we could try to do something, right? So it was like that kind of, so all of these concerns and considerations. And it was amazing to watch it happen. Later on, this last year, so this was the year before, later on this last year, on the northern strip, which I happen to live near, 2 blocks from, is really kind of a progressive traffic group. A lot of the people, they want their separated bike lanes, they love their the citizens love these things. And the weirdest thing happened, there were 2 left turn bans that would have meant that cars wouldn't have been able to turn up into their neighborhood. And they voted down the entire project because of 2 left turns. And one of those left turns was right near a middle school, and there had been a number of kids struck by vehicles. And so, luckily, we had been working in the schools and the senior centers, and so those people all turned out and said, are you out of your minds? Because you'd be inconvenienced and have to go a little bit further to make your left-hand turn, or make a series of right-hand turns, you're voting down this whole thing. So we're able to now get communities to work together because we can really see how well these things work. And the last thing I want to talk to you about is neighborhood slow zones. I think you guys may have a project similar. This is where we go from 30 miles an hour to 20 miles an hour in regions. And this is an application process. Communities apply. They have to have their council member support. They have to have the community board support. They have to have support letters from neighbors and things like that. And it's a very simple idea, which is inside of our arterials. So we can't move to 20 miles an hour on our arterial roads. It's 30. 30 is our citywide speed limit. You can cordon off the entire area, call the whole thing 20 miles an hour with just a few little prompts, gateway signs, and speed bumps here and there. You can keep everybody understanding that they're in the 20 mile an hour zone. And it has been so popular. The first year we put it out, 100 neighborhoods applied. We were only able to give 13 of them their preference. And now we did another round, and we have about 20 that we'll be doing over the next 3 years. So just to go over that, it's very simple. You just set the speed limit at 20. We don't have to ask the state for that right, because it's a limited treatment of a change in the speed limiting. We just put down markers. As you can see here, like in the Bronx, those are the gateway signs. Do you see them here? So it's just a simple sign. We've painted a curb extension, we've daylit the corner, and we put in these signs. And so it's just a prompt. It tells drivers, now I'm coming around the corner, I'm coming through the gateway, I'm in the 20 mile an hour zone. And we understood that this is really working in a lot of other places, in London, in the UK, in the Netherlands. There have been the crash reductions have been amazing. So we sort of had a lot of reasons that we wanted to do it. And we also believe that there are quality of life improvements, in a lot of these neighborhoods, and you can see these kids walking to their school in their neighborhood slow zone. Just the cut-through traffic that New Yorkers do just to avoid inconvenience is shocking. And then once somebody's in that mentality, they're not thinking they're in someone's neighborhood, and they're driving aggressively because they left 10 minutes late. So we really needed to do that work. And then the other piece is that we're putting in a bunch of speed bumps. Now in New York City, just because you're traffic, I think you'll think this is funny. So we also felt the need to explain to the communities that they were actually humps, not bumps. But it's because we're afraid to put up a sign in New York City that says hump, because they always get stolen. But we had about a 6-month conversation about whether or not we should be designating them as humps or bumps. So once I put together a slide where they could explain the difference between humps and bumps, when they made their presentations, everybody felt safer. To be fair, I now have a speed hump in front of my house. I live in a neighborhood slow zone, somehow, which was amazing, because I had nothing to do with it, but my Warm Hill Association and my council member, now they all got together, and they got me a speed hump in front of my house. And it is the quietest thing you could ever imagine. Note that, that traditional bump, the engineering is now so amazing that all it is good. So, and again, these 20 mile an hour markings, and then the other compromise we made, and you guys can relate to this, is nothing that says you are now leaving the slow zone. Normally when we put something up and fines are increased, whatever, especially like in our school zones where we have 20 miles an hour, we have to say, you are now out of the school zone, right? You are required by the manual to do that. But because it's not like fines are doubled or anything like that, it's just a suggestion. It has allowed us to not have to do a lot of that stuff, which really clutters the street and makes it a lot less able to implement. So you can see here, right, these are the neighborhood streets that are tucked in with these arterials. This was our first one in the Bronx. And that's what they look like. We're very proud of them. They're making a big difference. So I'm happy to take questions. I've got pictures of other things. We can talk about whatever you're interested in. One of the things I didn't bring with me, but I should have for you guys, is when we very, very first started, and Jeanette started, and she's a transit-oriented development person, but she understands the power of a good street design manual. So when she first came in, I'm sure you guys are in the same situation, right? There are certain things when we get federal money or we get state money, we have to meet those mandates. But inside our city, when we use our own money to do things, we are capable of doing things the way that we want to. And so the very first thing is a bunch of people got together and other agencies and redesigned our street manual. And we've just come out with our second edition. And it's just page after page after page of treatments, of ideas, and also where you can and can't make requests. So citizens can use this. Right on the grid in Manhattan, you really can't do a lot of things. Right? It's almost impossible. A neighborhood can't apply to us on the Upper West Side and say, because they're inside the grid, and say, can you close the street off to traffic and make it into a pedestrian plaza? And the answer is no. Can't close off a street in the grid. So that's really helped us as well focus and organize the asks from communities, and also allowed us then to use paint and just throw things together in places where we know we can have safety improvements quickly. So it's been good for all of us. And so I highly recommend that. Yes?
Before you know, we'd also suggest, I think this group would be interested in seeing some of the advocacy and the awareness stuff you were doing.
Oh yeah,
Just a few
sure,
slides
got that.
on
I
the
can
look
find,
campaign and, yeah.
I can take a run for that.
But
Sir, I
questions first.
can multitask, I'm female.
Yeah, I was wondering about operations, and how did operations react then to the Safer Streets program? I'm thinking that, and did they get additional dollars then to accommodate the requirements for snow clearing and other operations?
Yeah, obviously we had to work quickly. Now, the thing about putting in most of these things is that they didn't affect snow clearance as much as you might think. Will you just find me my next show? So operations has done okay because again, we work with FDNY and police, right? We have to make sure that vehicles can clear, emergency vehicles can clear everything, including our pedestrian plazas, right? That's hugely important in our separated bike lanes. And sanitation and snow clearing, but I think we just, we push the boundary, but not too much. People can do that. Now, with our pedestrian plazas, someone else must do the snow clearing, right? So we don't put in a plaza that's not being maintained by a private partner. And that's made things much easier. So in Times Square, for example, sanitation's not going in, and their mandate is to clear 7th Avenue and the cross streets that are still open, but then Times Square is open to the Times Square Alliance, which supports the efforts of the plaza. And if you think about it, it makes perfect sense, right? They're making so much more money because of the plaza. They therefore take their monies and they put it into the maintenance and care of the plaza.
So how much of an obligation was there on the Alliance then to take on that obligation? And if they didn't, then you would not go ahead with this program?
Correct. Yeah, actually, when it comes to pedestrian plazas, and I can only speak to this because it's my husband's program, but normally I don't know the details as well about certain things. It requires a private-public partnership and a total sign-off and agreement between the two entities. We cannot put a plaza in a place where it will not be maintained by a private company. Now, one of the things that means is that's why we began in the heavier and much more moneyed areas with the fancy bids. But we always knew that we would be spiraling out into the boroughs. And as we did that, the idea was to also build an alliance of maintenance. So we now have the Neighborhood Plaza Partnership that's where corporations and entities can give money in to this central maintenance partner, essentially. They work with the Horticultural Society and our DOE fund and ACE funds, and those are anti-recidivism programs for formerly incarcerated individuals who come in, they learn how to take care of the plazas. So we're able to leverage that. That's who the agreement is with, like, we'll get the Queens Museum of the Arts to be the sponsor plaza, to sponsor the plaza, but they can't themselves provide any maintenance or even afford that maintenance. So therefore they have a grant from Neighborhood Plaza Partnership that then comes in and takes care of that when it snows, or the planters and keeping the plantings. You know, I mean, planters are beautiful, but someone has to water them, right? And then what we know in New York City, and I'm sure it's true here, is the second something starts looking ratty, it's no longer pleasant, so people don't use it. And we definitely know that because there was a plaza program in the 70s, just like there was a bike lane program in the 70s under Mayor Edward Koch. And he put all this stuff in with absolutely no plan to maintain anything. And those things were still crumbling when I moved to New York City in the late 80s, right? They were like, you'd be like, what is this place? You know, just crumbling. So that's the idea, is you must have a partnership there. And sanitation has been great. And FDNY has been amazing. I mean, they've also been huge partners and advocates during the whole bike share situation, where of course we've been taking some parking space, some small amount of parking spaces and reallocating them to bike share stations. And what will happen is, you know, a building will say, now the fire department can't get in here because there's a bike share station. And the FDNY will say, what are you talking about? We can just drive over this thing. We couldn't drive over the cars, right? You know, this is better for us. Every place we put these stations, they're just so much more facile for us. So, and again, I think that it's very easy for neighborhoods to say they're not working with all of these other entities. These aren't going to work out. So we have to have their sign off before we do anything. So, Wallace wants me to show you some of my work. So my work is to try to figure out how to communicate with New Yorkers so that they can be safer. And I do come from the advocacy community. So first and foremost, I like to educate drivers, then cyclists, then pedestrians. But my feeling is that, you know, we have to multimodal educate. So these markings are look markings. My problem with New Yorkers is they will literally only allow me to communicate with them with one word. They only have time for one word. So, you know, I do all of these intricate campaigns, and I have a That's Why It's 30 campaign, which I'll show you. All of that takes too much time for them to think about, so just look. And these, I'm sure you can see, are a tribute to the look markings, or the markings that are in the UK when people come from all over and need to understand the traffic is coming from another direction. And the googly eyeballs go in the direction of where the traffic is coming. And we put these down on our high crash intersections. And they are on the ground in such a way that if you are stepping out onto the curb while you are looking at your cell phone, it actually is right underneath you. So that's the idea, is as you come into the crosswalk, the look marking is there, you know, and so you look. And so then because of this logo, which everybody now can recognize, we put it on everything. It goes in many places, so here's an example. So now I've put this in every cab. Look for cyclists. And so, especially before we began our city bike program, the idea is that before you open your door, you'll do that. So this stuff starts to reflect. So whenever you can, I find that if I'm just following the engineers, when they're putting in all this great stuff, just putting little markings and little signs or symbols places that people will see them. The problem is we have so much sign clutter. It's why we don't actually post our speed limit in very many places in New York City. You just simply cannot see it. Right? We're not spread out like this. Every time I see a speed limit sign, I think, here. But there, it's like literally, there's 12 signs. In fact, we've been trying to get rid of many, many of our signs so we can actually see something. And this is a project I do where I put speed boards up where we have when we're establishing a speeding crisis. And what happens here is it says speed limit 30 miles an hour, and it's the pedestrian symbol. And then if you pass it too quickly, it morphs into a skeleton and it says slow down. And this gets a lot of attention in neighborhoods. So it's a little gimmicky, but it works. And then I also have your regular speed boards, which in New York we call our vanilla speed boards, where, you know, because it's nothing. Where we put a speed board just to educate the community. We often do that before we'll come in to do a street redesign to establish the problem. And then this is our That's Why It's 30 campaign. When I began the city of New York, I asked to do a study to find out if any New Yorkers knew what the speed limit was, and the answer was no. In fact, most New Yorkers said, there's a speed limit, literally. So we started to work on a way to be impactful. This is the stuff that we do with the grown-ups. When we work with kids, we look at speeding, we look at the velocity of cars, and we look at the physics of things. So kids understand when people are going 20 miles an hour, it takes them a certain amount to stop, 30, 40. And we have that conversation with them so that they understand that they can't trust cars to stop, and also that they need to ask their families to slow down. But in this case, this is what we put up for adults. And these are our statistics based on our crashes with inside New York City, which is that when we do the speed research, we know that 70% of people who are hit by cars going 40 or above actually die in those crashes. But when the speed is reduced, there are injuries but not fatalities. So there's something about the New York mentality. This works. I don't know why. These statistics work. And this is a licensed image from London, England. Her name is Skull Girl. And we use her in places where we need fast impact. I'm not sure what else I have here. Oh, there I am. So this is also the work I do with children. That's my commissioner, Jeanette Sadekhan, with the speed detector, and me hiding with a group of kids along Atlantic Avenue where there's a speeding crisis. So they're actually having a press conference, and the speed gun is attached to a board that is flashing these numbers, and people are going about 50 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone with a bunch of school children standing right there. So it was very easy to kind of establish an issue. There they are again doing the research. It's a research phase where they collect their data and they work and try to understand what's going on. So those are the campaign pieces, and it's so important to have somebody who's reflecting the values and trying to also drive down fatalities and injuries through public messaging. Okay, questions, answers? I don't know if I can answer them, I can try. In the back.
Yes, just with reference to cycling, have
Yes.
you found that your big events like the 5-borough
Bike tour.
has that increased people's interest in getting more people out riding and buying bikes?
Yeah, well, the 5-borough is a 40-year tradition, and it's something the DOT is heavily involved with, right? We close all of those streets. It's one of my favorite days, and then we all take the ferry. I really think that the thing that has really encouraged cycling is building infrastructure. I mean, if you build it, they will come. We started on 9th Avenue 6 years ago, and we built 9th, 8th, 1st, 2nd Avenues, now all the way up to 125th Street into East Harlem. Just building and building separated infrastructure. Our most famous is Prospect Park West. I think I have it right here, because we were sued. We put in Prospect Park West. It's a two-way separated bike lane along the park in Brooklyn. It's in this neighborhood where I said everyone's very progressive, but some of the homeowners who lived along the way it's backed up were very upset about it. Now, the irony is that there was such a speeding problem. Here it is. So this is what it was like, and this is what it was like. There were actually 4 lanes of traffic. Everyone knew this was the gateway to this park. It's an Olmsted Park. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful places you can ever imagine. And the huge Prospect Park West was the gateway to there. And crossing it, you took your life into your own hands. So the idea was we needed a lane reduction here. And we needed an organization tool. So we decided to put in a two-way separated bike lane. But again, the amount of bike encouragement that this has led to, and you can see the statistic is true, and it is recent. It's been in the last month that 64% of New Yorkers have approved their bike lanes. So, and that's amazing given the fact that 3 years ago it was hugely controversial. So that's what it looks like, and there's organized parking and places for people to wait and cross the street. Obviously, we rely on cyclists to be excellent cyclists and understand that there are many, many pedestrians. But the most important thing is that the speeding has really been reduced. We did have a child fatality on PPW 2 weeks ago, which just, when I got the notice, I was shocked. Just because of that people were still able to speed, you know, I mean, I just don't think we can ever do enough in these situations. But I think that that's really what it was. It's just building infrastructure, normalizing cycling, and, you know, and increasing we put 350 miles, so almost 500 plus kilometers of new bike lanes in 6 years. Now, some of those are sharrows, some of them are just class 2 stripes, some of them are curbside, and some of them are separated. And so I think the more that New Yorkers have realized that that's a part of the landscape, the more normal it becomes. Then you take a bunch of blue bikes and you put them out on the streets every other block. What I'm just shocked by is just what happened this summer when we opened up our city bike program, which is just all of the separated bike lanes are so packed. It's almost comical sometimes to see how many people, and you know, ridden by glamorous celebrities down separated bike lanes, and it's just almost become, I don't know, almost absurd, given how much bike lash there was, you know, 3 years ago. So, yeah.
When it comes to cycling, you said this is a very prominent neighborhood. When it comes to less favorable neighborhoods, you know, low socioeconomic status, how's the uptake with cycling and, you know, putting in infrastructure there?
You cycle faster.
Yeah. Whoa. Actually, you know, in New York City, low-income neighborhoods have a huge amount of cyclists. One of the big jobs that you can get when you come to New York as an immigrant, especially from China or from Latin America, is to be a delivery cyclist and deliver food. So the cycling, and those guys they usually have to bring their own bikes. So they're coming from these outer neighborhoods and they're biking in and they're using their cycles, or they're delivering it within their own neighborhoods. So we know that that's true. I just think that those cyclists are not being counted, right? The only way we count is the commuter cyclists that come over the bridges to go to work in the central business district. So we know that, but actually we just got a huge amount of bike lanes put into our, arguably still our most dangerous and underserved community, which is Brownsville and Brooklyn. And it just took one woman, she's a wonder. Her name is Betty Wallace Pollock, and she's a 75-year-old African-American woman who lives in Brownsville, who started a ride club 10 years ago. And she has just, you know, just never lost focus. And, you know, has youth ride clubs and adult ride clubs, and has been demanding and asking for these bike lanes for 10 years, and has had community meetings. And finally, it just seemed silly. It wasn't on the bike master plan, so we said we couldn't do it. And after a while, that just seemed so silly. You know, it wasn't on the bike master plan because, frankly, in 1993, I think the people who created the bike master plan, you know, were wrong about where people cycled. So I think it's very, very important that it feels, especially in communities, underserved communities, that the Department of Transportation is not just like landing and telling everyone that they want a bike. It really has to come from inside the community. But once you find those champions and you let them do their thing, and what you tell them is that if they actually organize something, they're going to get infrastructure, even if it's just class 2 bike lanes or sharrows in places, that's when the magic really happens. And we're seeing it happen everywhere. In New York City, like a champion council member who believes in complete streets, who just shows up out of nowhere in Corona, New York, which is a Mexican community, and says, wait, how come I can't get the stuff that the white people are getting? Right? And it's like, you can, right? That's what we want to be doing. And you have to help us translate, and I don't mean translate in language. I mean translate why these things are important when it seems like maybe they're not the most important thing in a community where people are having trouble, feeding their children. So, she's willing to champion that. You have to have the right people speaking the right words at the right time. Yes?
Do you see any issues with cyclists and pedestrians?
Of course.
Yeah.
If your job is to be the Director of Education and Outreach at the Department of Transportation, can you imagine how tired I am of cyclists? So I have a... Did I just say that on camera? No, just of bad cyclist behavior. And the thing is, as you know, once you have hundreds of thousands of cyclists, the 5 that blow through the light every time, become the cyclists. So we did the Look campaign, and we took the Look campaign and we did our top 5 rules, yield to pedestrians, stop at the light, don't go the wrong way, don't ride on the sidewalk, how's that? And have lights, and that's my top 5 is have lights. It's so important. I run the helmet giveaway program. I gave away my 100,000th free helmet 3 weeks ago in 6 years. So we believe very strongly in helmet encouragement and helmet giveaway, but to us, lights are the most important thing, right? There's so much perception from pedestrians that they will be hurt and injured by cyclists. I'm not exactly sure, I think it's gotten much better, but the problem is we can't stand up when we're touting our record numbers of changes in pedestrian and car passenger fatalities and say, no, actually, you're gonna be hit and killed by a car, not a bike. Right? We can't do that. So I think there's just this misperception that bikes are more dangerous than they are. We have had one person killed by a bicycle. It was 6 years ago. And every day I wake up and really hope that we're not gonna have that happen again. But I think slowly and surely, as we explain the infrastructure to senior citizens, a separated bike lane means that then you just simply wait for there to be no cyclists. You cross there. Now you only have 2 lanes of traffic to cross when you're in danger with vehicles. I think it's starting to make a lot more sense to people why we put bike lanes where we put them and what they're for and how to navigate them so that they actually create safety. But it's just a long undertaking. My family lives on the Berrien and Dean Street bike lane superhighway for bikes. And every day I have a conflict with a cyclist. Literally. I do carry a badge. It makes it a little bit easier.
I need a badge.
You can take my badge.
I'll take your badge.
All right.
The badge is very cool. It's like Dragnet.
It is. It makes me look like I'm really, really important. Sir.
In a slowdown zone where you guys posted 20 miles an hour, so initially I think the posted speed limit was 30 miles an hour and
Yes.
you changed it to 20.
Correct.
So what was the enforceable speed limit? Was it changed to 20 from 30, or the 30 would be the enforceable speed limit? That was the first question. Second is, what was the compliance rate? Were people following that, like the 20 miles an hour?
Yeah.
Or did you have to work with the enforcement to get the higher
Yeah.
compliance rate?
So I have to be careful here. Once we get into enforcement issues, I represent the city of New York and my police chief is Ray Kelly. So he's doing a great job. Enforcement of speeding and motor vehicle related incidences are a very low priority for NYPD. So I can tell you that the speed limit on residential streets is almost never enforced. So we don't know, we know what the compliance rates are because we take our own speeds, but the enforcement is really difficult. Yeah, the enforceable speed limit is 20 miles an hour, but it does not bring with it the fines that we sometimes put on or the elevated fines that come with a school zone, for example. So we just dropped the speed limit temporarily in certain areas. That allows us, it's a little bit easier for us to do that. We're not petitioning to the state to say, let's change the speed limit for the entire city of New York. We're just saying in these regions where it's very carefully marked. What we know is that the 20 mile an hour speed limit is helping a lot. There are still places where people are speeding because we cannot put speed bumps on a bus route, on a truck route, on other things like that. So there are some bits, I mean, the speed humps really help, and they're on the other roads. People are not in compliance with the 30 mile an hour speed limit, especially on two-bay arterials. They usually drive about 20 miles an hour faster when they can, when it's not rush hour and when there's not congestion. So what we know is that the 20 mile an hour places are really helping calm traffic, but it's not, people are not always in compliance, and it's very hard for us to get enforcement. Right? I have requested enforcement along one street in my neighborhood slow zone, and what the police will tell me, and I understand this, is they don't know, they literally don't know how to enforce it, how to catch someone on a 5-block place. Like, so they're speeding and somebody catches them, what are they going to do, chase off in a car my residential neighborhood to grab this speeder. They're very nervous about creating an alternative danger. So it's very complicated. That's going to probably be an issue for our next mayor and our next police chief. Although we may have the same one, I don't know. So.
Kim, I just wanted, the one thing that's really struck me is I've heard two presentations from Kim now is the speed with which some of these things, you keep talking about, it's just sort of paint and planters. I mean, I think Times Square was all done in a 6-hour period in the middle of the night,
It's
sort of
true.
thing. Speaking from my perspective, the schools we've been working with, we obviously generate requests from the school communities that we're
Yes.
engaged with for a lot of often very minor infrastructure
Sure.
fixes. We work on other things as well, and the enforcement and the education and all of that, but inevitably engineering things do come up. And without naming names or pointing fingers, we're often waiting a long time, even for fairly minor things. And I'm just curious, how did you make that happen within your municipality to sort of speed up the process
Right.
of doing some of these smaller things so that the community sees a result?
Right.
In fact, that it doesn't get bogged down in a capital project that isn't going
Right.
to happen for 10 years.
Well, we do have Safe Routes to School, which is our capital project. That's 135 schools, right? But that's a long process.
Yes.
So I think the way that you do it is by coupling those requests with other things like these corridors, for example, where you just make a change to the whole corridor. Or you take paint to make, to temporarily test out a bulb out, or to test things, or put flexible delineators places as a proof of concept. And I think you're right, it's funny, I think when we first came, when we were talking to community boards, they would always be really resistant. And we couldn't figure out that the reason was because they had been there so many times before and told that things would change, and then in their perception it never happened. Because years would go by and they wouldn't even know, you're not getting a report about what's happening or what the engineers are working on. So I think quick wins, but quick wins in school zones really helps. Even if that's, I don't know, whatever you've got in your toolbox. I mean, if they don't have countdown signals and you can throw a couple in there, you don't have, even, we find in New York, even just fixing the markings there when they're requested creates allies and champions. Or small things where we really do note that if we could just paint a little bit of paint, put some flexible delineators and have a temporary bulb out, it really helps. Or closing a small slip road that has been creating an additional conflict, putting paint down there and some construction barrels for a little while and making a plaza. We won't do that unless the community asks us to, but we'll often find that it's these places where conflicts have been created and people are getting hit by cars because it's an unnecessary road that people are using. So, that's really the trick. The trick is just to find the places where you can put in these little wins. Then, when you go into communities, you really want to do something innovative or you really want to fix a problem, they believe you that you're going to fix those things, but you need time and you need statistical analysis and you need to do your studies. And you need to send your consultants out there, and that is a 2 or 3 year process. It's not that people are being ridiculous. And then we send it to construction guys, they are being ridiculous.
So for some of this very small, the quick win stuff, are you talking, is this days, weeks, a couple of months? Like what sort of generally
Yeah,
is
so
it?
the way that we do it now is we look at our street improvement projects for the following year in November. So we'll sit down and do that this year. It's a little complicated, right, because we're getting a new mayor. And most likely we'll have a new commissioner. So it's a little bit hard to put your street improvement project schedule together, not knowing who the person is coming in. But every year, we sit and we look at our high crash corridors, and we think about what we could get done within that time. So if in November, I'm told that we're gonna change Adam Clayton Powell by June or July, I have from November to June to go into the schools to talk to people. We have that time to do the traffic studies and to get our borough commissioner ready to have these conversations and do all that stuff. So that what we want is that the community board will have voted it in by June. And only once have we done something that a community board didn't vote in, and it was Adam Clayton Powell. We just couldn't convince them. And after the third person died, after they kept asking us to come back to redo the plan, we just said we're doing it anyway. So that's the idea, and then we have our street improvement projects. We can actually start maybe in March and go all the way to November. As I see, you guys have a very robust construction season as well. And so, that's how we do it. So you know, we get that done within less than a year. The capital projects are now considered different. Our street improvement projects are the things that our crews are working on. And then we have to get fire to sign off, we've got to get sanitation to sign off. So it's a lot of very fast work, which is why we have to get ourselves organized now. I'll probably go back and get my invitation to the street improvement project meeting, and we do borough by borough, right? Because in our case, we have a different set of borough engineers. So people only work in Manhattan, or only Staten Island, or only Queens. Separate crews, separate sign crews, separate borough engineers, separate everything, and separate borough commissioners. Because it's really different. Those areas are really different. Those neighborhoods are really different. So we need different expertise.
I'm going to cut you off because I know people are dropping
yeah.
off the room because I know we said we're only going to go to 11. But maybe if we conclude the formal
Yes,
thing, and if anyone
great
wants
idea.
to stick around and ask you a few questions. Okay, is that okay? He's going to get me back. He's
Okay.
going to paint some lines on my street.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you
It's my pleasure.
for sharing the New York experience, and it's hopefully it inspires people at the front line to make some positive change in the community and
Thank you so
working with
much.
their community partners.
And I want to say it's been amazing to be here in Ottawa. I'm so excited to see your first separated bike lane. But also to take a tour and really get to know teachers and people working everywhere. It's been really exciting, and I'm going to take all of the green travel planning back with me and bring it to Staten Island to see if I can get away with it. You know, that's our driving community. You know, it's been really a pleasure, so thank you so much for hosting me today. It was an honor.
Excellent.
I wanted to know about the budget. I mean, people are paying their budgets and they...
So, but yeah, Al's
It's
question
paint.
is going to be.
Usually this is a government city.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a city in Wyman.
No, I know. So that's why we use paint and we use our sidewalk materials.